going to do lesson 58, lead coefficients, more on completing the square. Hopefully you understand how to complete the square, but if not, maybe today will help. We're going to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. You have to do the method that they say. If you think you could do it an easier way, you still have to do it by completing the square if the directions say complete the square. So let's look at this problem. It's a quadratic equation. It means it's going to have two answers. You could either factor it and set it equal to 0. We're going to use a quadratic formula later. But today we're going to do completing the square. The difference today is there is a number in front of the x squared term, which is called your lead coefficient. He gets to be the lead coefficient. Anyway, you cannot have a number other than 1 in front of your x squared term in order to do the completing the square problems. So the first thing you have to do if you're going to complete the square is divide every term by the lead coefficient, unless it's 1, in order to make it 1. So I'm going to divide this term by 4 and get x squared, this term by 4, this term by 4, and now we have a lead coefficient of 1, and we can complete the square. Now let's start with our completing square. You can see that we have these fractions, which aren't always fun, but this one's not too difficult. First thing you need to do is you need to take the non-perfect square term to the other side. So we're going to get x squared plus 3/4 x plus something equals 3/4 plus something. We add it to both sides to keep our equation balanced. Now in order to complete the square, if you haven't gotten this so far, is we take the coefficient of the x term, we divide it by 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by a half, and then we square it. So in this case, we're going to get 3/8 squared, and that's going to be what we put in here. So you take the coefficient of the x term, you divide it by half, which is the same by 2, which is the same as multiplying by 1/2, and you square it. So we're going to get over here 9/64. And we got that, we have to put it over here. That keeps our equation balanced. Now, believe it or not, this is a perfect square trinomial, and they factor into x plus 3/8 quantity squared. And we do have to add these, find a common denominator, and it's going to be 57/64. So you have to change this denominator into 64. Now we take the square root of both sides, so we get x plus 3/8 equals plus or minus the square root of 57/64. By taking the square root, it frees what's in the squared term, and that's what we get. And then you have to remember the plus and minus. Now we just have to bring the 3/8 to the other side. So we get x equals -3/8 plus or minus the square root of 57/8. The square root of 64 is 8, so we don't want to keep it under the radical when it can be simplified. And that is an ugly answer, but it's the right answer. And if we were to take that and put it up here where our x's are in some major calculator, we would get 0. So let's try another one. This one looks more manageable. We'll see. We're supposed to solve this by completing the square. First thing we notice, there's a coefficient in front of our x squared term. We need to get rid of that by dividing every single term by 5. When you have an equation, what you do to one thing, you have to do to everything. So we're going to divide everything by 5, so we're going to get x squared minus x over 5 minus 2/5 equals 0. Now we're going to complete the square. We're going to move the non-perfect square term to the other side. I'm going to make this 1/5 x, just so it's easier to deal with, plus blank equals 2/5 plus blank. We take the coefficient of the x term, we divide it in half by 2, which is the same as multiplying by a half, and square it. So we're going to get 1/100. That would be let me just write that out, 1/10 squared, which is 1/100. And we add that to the other side. Now this is a perfect square trinomial, which can be factored as x minus 1/10 quantity squared. Again, you need to find the common denominator, which would be 100. 5 goes into 100 20 times. 20 times 2 is 40. Add those together, and you get 41 over 100. Take the square root of both sides. I'll just put this step in this time. And we get x minus 1/10 equals plus or minus the square root of 41. And remember, the square root of 100 is just 10. So I'm just going to put this over 10. Add 10 to both sides, so we get x equals 1/10 plus or minus. This can be simplified. It's not in simplest form. This is 4 times 10. So it's going to be square root of 4 is 2 square root of 10 over 10, and then this can even be reduced. So your final answer is x equals 1/10 plus or minus square root of 10 over 5. And actually this was supposed to be 41, so that's all wrong. It's just 41. Square root of 41 over 10. I don't know why I'm translating.